they need to know. I try to take it more in the direction of why is this so important to you? I'll be honest, in my office, I usually find out that they're either gay or they're bisexual or they're transgender, and they are hating on a lot of the insides, you know, and that's really what it comes down to. So just instead of trying to get them to understand that this is, you know, sometimes if you go the route of, you know, it's okay if you don't agree with this, but you have to disagree respectfully. Does that make more sense? Okay. So those are some of the, from teens, this is another group. Following through with what you say you're going to do. I have a lot of, I know you said that you work on pronouns and stuff, and I think that's awesome, and that your kiddo is very respectful. I forgot how you said it, but very patient, that's what you said. Okay, well some kids aren't patient because they're not getting the support that they need, and so whenever you do make a mistake, one of the most important things is to say, you know, just take a quick responsibility for it. Oh, I'm sorry. And then pronounce the correct pronoun. It does need acknowledgement, because even if it's done and somebody catches it, it's still an acknowledgement that they are not in the right body. Does that make sense? It's okay for them to process that because they are not in the right body. But it's just an acknowledgement that you understand that this is a transition, just like you said you've done it. Yes, ma'am.
I have a friend who's in a different district, and she has a student that every week it changes. He or she would like to be called a she, and then the next week it's a he, and so she has a very hard time figuring out what pronoun to use. And then if she doesn't use the right pronoun and doesn't realize that we've switched to a different gender, then the student is very upset.
What about they? Would they be okay with they?
I don't know if she's brought that up.
They is a really neat pronoun. I know it sounds plural, and it goes against everything as a teacher that breaks my soul sometimes whenever I hear it. But it's really become a very productive word for a lot of the teachers who are struggling. One, I cap it. I say, okay, this is something that we're processing internally and in the office, and so this teacher cannot go back and forth with you. So we need to come up with something that works for you for a little bit of longevity so that the teacher can do her job and get the information to you. Education is the most important thing in my office, and my kids can't stand probably that I was a teacher for so long. So I'm like, if you can't learn, if you can't function in these classrooms, then you're not going to be able to sustain anything after you get out of school. So let's figure out how to keep you in the classroom, and then we'll work on why your teachers don't do the pronouns exactly the way you want to, and how you can use your own words. So they is one that I came up with that has helped some people. They is used like whenever the post office delivers your mail, you don't say, did she deliver the mail? You say, hey, did they bring the mail? And you're just being respectful to the unknown. Does that make sense? So whenever we're referencing it as far as gender, sometimes it's the fluidity that you're being respectful of using the word they. So did they come back from the bathroom? Also, teachers also use just names. So Mary went to the bathroom. Mary had a cat. Mary saw the dog in Mary's house instead of her house.
Well, she switched, the student switches between the male name and a female name, so that makes it even more complex.
Yeah, you know what, and maybe what they need to do is that they need to come up with a nickname that's positive for both experiences for themselves. Does that make sense? So, you know, like Joe can be both a girl Joe and a boy Joe. And so maybe they just need to come up with a middle ground so that while they explore internally, they don't have to worry about everything else and the back and forth. Does that make sense? And if that doesn't work, let me know, and I'll try to figure out something else. Okay, gender roles, masculine and feminine. I put that up there just in case you guys had questions. I know you see gender special again. I promise they don't pay me, but I love this place. They give teachers so many good things. So if you have time, go to that website, and it gives you like some of the phrases and stuff that I used whenever I first started working with them is from this one. But it says, don't make gender nonconforming kids pick a blue or pink chair. They may pick one just to make you comfortable. So basically, it's the same thing that we were doing. Take the gender out of it and make it about the kids. So North Pole, South Pole, whatever you teach. If you're a verb, go over there. If you're a noun, go over there. You know, if you're part of South America, North America, utilize the time. You know, tell your teachers to utilize that time instead of segregating kids out. The most horrific thing is whenever they go to a class and they have a teacher, they can't even concentrate the whole time because they know this teacher always makes them do activities, boys and girls. And so there'll be lessons, good lessons, that I'm just like, did you get anything out of the lesson? Let's talk about the lesson. And they're like, I have no idea. Because the whole time I was sitting there going, she's about to do it, she's about to do it, she's about to have us get over there in the rooms, you know, and that's what they learned. So keeping the gender out of the room, it's not saying that you agree with transitioning or you don't. It's saying that you know how to adapt and acclimate to the class that you're teaching. And that's kind of the thing that as counselors we have to kind of take back. Assess your comfortable level. Where am I? Oh my gosh, am I running over?
No, you're good.
Okay. Assess your comfort level. I would rather not. I am uncomfortable. I will not. Gender, sexual orientation, and being transgender. Like I said about the sub, and that's kind of what I want to come back to because I have had so many different examples of that. But you have to know where you're at. You have to know who you are as a person and what you're comfortable with. If you would rather not talk about it, that's fine. I have a lot of counselors who do a great job of referring them out. And that's totally fine because they don't want to go with that conversation and whenever they don't agree with it. I'm uncomfortable with it. May mean that there just needs to be some education that needs to be done. And then I will not. And there are some counselors, and there are some counselors higher up that won't, not here, but I mean in districts and stuff, that just don't want to deal with it. And that's, refer them out. That's fine in teachers. I talked about this just a minute ago. Boy-girl lines, things that are feminine and masculine, try to pass on whenever you have the conversations with them because sometimes sexuality is not attached to the expression of it. So in other words, you may have a very feminine lesbian who is fine with dressing with a dress and being a girly girl, but still doesn't want to date the boys, and like separating those things out to where it has to be one way or another. That's kind of, you want to make your verbiage very, very non-binary for them. I think we talked about all these. Oh, preferred names. Whenever I was in California, I heard there was a doctor that was speaking from another area, and I have always used preferred name. What's your preferred name? And kind of what they're moving to a more healthier aspect is what is the name you want to be called, and then what is your legal name and our birth name, and then that way, the birth certificate conversation is not what I'm trying to get to, but the legal name separates it from their identity, and it's just a thing. But the name that they want to be called is identified with who they are. Does that make sense? And so that's kind of what I was trying to say with the others. Personal judgment. How do I care for a student when I don't agree? You guys do a good job of this. Focus on doing no harm. That's your job, is to make sure that you do no harm and that you try to redirect in a positive way. So supporting the family and the teens and hope that they stay in the home. My goal, especially because I have worked with kiddos who are on the streets, my goal is to keep these kids in their houses. Like, I want them in their homes and I want them going to school. And so whatever that looks like, the parents, whenever you talk to the parents, how can we get to a middle ground? I have parents who are very, very, very strong Christians who have absolutely no desire to support at all the kids. But they come in there, and in that room, it's a safe place for them to use the pronouns that they want to use, the names that they want to use. Okay, so that's a compromise. This is where the kid is. This is the transition part, our sexuality. I'm not going to have your friend over. You can't stay in the same house or in the school. But find the compromise is what I'm trying to get to, because it's such a touchy area. You don't want to support it and feel like you are trying to make them this way, but you also don't want to make it to where it's wrong. Focus on your goal instead of the emotional detail. If you are someone who's just very much against any of the community, that is completely okay. That is completely your business after you clock out. Because you have kiddos who are in the community. And so you teach and you counsel the kids that are in your office. Right? That's the message. Who are you working with? What is sitting in front of you? And how are you going to help them best? Conversations are focused on the needed growth of the individual due to the reason for the visit. That's what I just said. Safety is always the first topic. In my office, I do get to kind of talk and communicate with the kids. I know and you guys, I think with the parents, y'all have to kind of maneuver that a little bit differently. So sometimes they get to explore who they are as individuals before we kind of bring the parents into the fold. But as long as you're communicating with the teachers and the kids and the parents, I stay away from that one. How to keep the teens that was kind of what she touched on just a second ago. I do have the kids tell their parents. One of the agreements is that they never have to do anything alone. So like whenever they come into my office, in y'all's office, the cool thing about this is that they're no longer alone. You may not understand something, or you may not know exactly what this path is going to look like for them, but they're not alone anymore. And that's the most important message for them to get from you, that you're doing this with them. And if there's a tricky conversation to be had, you're going to be processing it with them. My kiddos, if I feel like I tell them I'm not a tattletale and I'm not a secret keeper. So I'm not going to keep your secrets from your parents, and I'm not going to tattle on your children every time you want me to. But we will come in and I will help you learn how to have conversations as a family and work through some of these difficult situations. And that's kind of, the kids know that coming in, that they're going to have these conversations. They just don't have to have them alone. I'll sit with them. Talking to the parents, you can maneuver the conversation in a way that it's about the offense, as long as the offense is not about the sexuality or the gender. Does that make sense? So like if they're bullying someone, you can talk to a parent about bullying without having it be they're bullying it because they're transgender. You can't help the kids by giving them that space to kind of be safe in. Teaching tolerance in the classroom. That is a picture of me teaching for the Northwest Social Worker Alliance. But this one, it's a really cool link. Can I click on that from here? I wanted to show y'all real quick, as long as I have time. This one is, no, it's not good. Okay, that's okay. Anyway, teaching tolerance in the classroom. This is where it has a whole bunch of links. So if you want this one, it specifically works with your teachers so that you can help guide them and the counselors. Identifying bullies. I find that whenever I'm working with the LGBT community, there's always like that kid that seems to just stalk them. And so whenever I start to hear it in the conversation, and it's a kid usually who in general doesn't like most things that are going on. So just identifying and teaching the kids that they know how to stand up as far as working with those being bullied. Make sure that you're pulling it in, and make sure you're pulling in the bullies to teach them better skills so that they know how to talk. They're going to ask questions about why people are gay and homosexuals, and you're going to have to come up with, like, why is that significant to you? Why is that your business? And what does it matter? Like, how does this affect you? Those are kind of some directions that have been successful. If expressing yourself as LGBT is said to be a disruption, ask for an explanation. I do tell my kids, if you happen to have a crush on John and You send him a note, well, that's sending a note in class. You should get reprimanded for sending a note in class, but you should get reprimanded for giving John a note. Does that make sense? And those are some of, so distinguish, separate out the offense with the kid as an individual. Okay. I think I kind of mix these in and I talk about them all at the same time. Is there any up there? That's what I said just a second ago. Unless it's got to do with the action, it's not our job to decide whether or not we like it. Okay, how did I do? Did I finish on that? Okay, but I did want to come back to some questions. Did you guys have any questions?
I think at the high school, one of the things that we struggle, or I feel that we struggle most with is just that parent piece and how to engage parents or have kids feel safe enough to have a conversation. So do you ever just work with parents alone? Have you done?
I do. I've had some parent support groups. I also have a parent Facebook group that they can go on. It's not a counseling group, but it's a group where parents who have kids who struggle with gender. I don't have one for sexuality right now, but I do have one for gender. But I also do parent group meetings. So if that's something that you guys ever wanted, I don't mind doing that. Like I said, the more we do preventatively, the less damage is done, and so the kids are taken care of better, and that's ultimately my goal. I happen to be very blessed that I get to focus on this. So with the parents, if you need a group, I don't mind doing one of those at all if you want to, just to have it outside of your but mostly I do have to bring them in and talk to them. And we have to work through, why is this uncomfortable? You know, what does it hurt for us to? Well, then it feel like I'm supporting it because a lot of them are religious beliefs as to why they don't want to. And I say, okay, but the fact is that you're here, so that means that you love your child. So let's figure out how to get your child to a healthy place. And that may look a little uncomfortable for you for just a little while, but we're going to bring it full circle, you know, and we're going to respect the fact that, like, my kids come in knowing sometimes your parents are not going to make that call so that you can, you know, do hormones or get to be with your boyfriend or whatever else. But you are going to be able to have your house and to function with your family, and that I kind of go back and I focus on that foundation and the system. That answered that exactly.
How would you advise, I guess, the kind of to the parent's perspective, like that's been the bigger issue in the past for me. A parent has forbade me to see their child because if I listened, then in their mind, that was me being supportive of their lifestyle that their parents didn't agree with. And so I recommended them taking their child to an outside counselor because if they could want me to see them, but of course they didn't. And so I guess just how do we support the child at that point? I mean,
So you're
It's
not
just
allowed to
out of
talk
our
to him at all?
no.
Okay.
Not about that. No, I mean, unless it's just cultural.
Yeah. Well, I think that he had that 2 other times, but what if the parents did get into counseling?
Yeah, I mean,
That's
if they
yeah.
would at least do that, I would feel like the kids.
Is the kid supported in the classroom?
Yes.
So I guess ultimately, because you do have to respect the parents', you know, wishes and everything, and ultimately you would have to go with the teacher and to make sure that she's supported and say, what do you need from me to help this kid, you know, function productively in your class? I think I would probably go the teacher route and just make sure, I know that not about that content, but if you can support them in other ways and the teacher can support them, you know, by catching some of that, because they're going to see the content. I mean, the content's going to be there at the school. So, and letting them support them. So I guess kind of giving your teacher some information and some guidance on how to deal with it, if she's the one that's kind of having, because they have conversations. You know, everybody can tell them not to, but their kids have conversations and they talk about it. So they have to be redirected. So maybe ethically being redirected. That's what you're going to have to work on with the teacher, how to ethically redirect. But I know this is a tricky content. The request mostly that I have, from the community is that I want you guys to know, I've talked to counselors who work on the outside. We know that it's hard, like that's why I'm here, because I know that you guys do have a hard job. And what I get to do in my office, you have to put into the educational realm and make sure that you're in different requirements. And you do a great job in this district of it. I know y'all have got some situations that are specific, and I do not mind, like, even if you want to just jot down my number and us talking about them to see kind of how we can help. In that kind of format, I have no problem with that. But with the parents, mostly, I bring the parents in. I'm very systematic. So in my office, I'll tell you this, and maybe it'll help since I can't give direct in the classroom or in the counseling. Whenever they come in, we talk about as a group unit, and we say, this is the problem. This family, it's still a system. It may be a broken system, but it's still a system. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out, like, mom doesn't want me to talk to you because of religious beliefs about this. But I know that you're struggling in this class because you feel uncomfortable. Maybe a teacher, I have teachers who share their political opinions, and my kiddos are, woo! So that's a big one in the classroom. And so if teachers can stay away from those political, like, so that would be like a supporting your teacher, go, I know you're very passionate. Maybe if we could take out some of the political out of the room, just unless they're a political class and they can't. But if they're an English class, maybe redirect them to help support just that one group, and not be quite so offensive contents. Does that make sense? And so whenever they come in, we talk about, like, how's this going to work together? How can it work in your room? How can it work at your house? Sometimes it takes me 6 months to get parents to use pronouns. Sexuality is one. Parents usually don't come around the kids, most of the time. The kids are usually like 18. I will tell you this, gender, and this is one of the last things about that I wanted to make sure I mentioned, I forgot it in there. Gender usually does start off as people questioning their sexuality, because it never makes sense to someone to go, oh, I went through puberty and this didn't change, and I thought that it was going to change, and I thought all girls looked like this. I thought all boys looked like this whenever I was younger, and now I know there's something wrong. So I must be gay. That's what they usually say first. And so then you get a lot of the parents who say, well, they were gay, they were pan, they were this, they were that, and what if this is just another phase? So in that aspect, be sure to reassure them that in exploring the self, it is going to be confusing. It is a journey, like kids do want to naturally pick the easiest thing. It's almost like, if you're doing a diet and you don't know how to cook that big fancy meal that they want you to so that everything works right, you try to cook the easier meal, you do try the easier solutions first. Usually that's logical. And so kind of share that with the parents, that they're trying to put that in and it may not work the first couple tries. And so that, I don't know, that's been a very big deal in my office.
I just find the kids nowadays are more tolerant, like their peers are so much more
Yes.
tolerant than when, just even like 5 or 10 years ago, there's not the bullying and all that stuff that there used to be.
I see a lot of kids doing a lot of good things. I do. I love kids. I talk because I love kids. I do counseling and I work with kids because I love kids. And I think that they have this ability to adapt and acclimate to so many different situations. And so tapping into that strength and helping them figure out, okay, how does this look? Like, mom and dad may not agree, but that doesn't make them not my mom and dad. I still have to be in this house. Like, I still have to figure out how to function. And the kids supporting them in the classroom a lot of times is so awesome, because they'll have a group of kids using the right pronouns, and so they're like, oh, right, this is great. Like, somebody's supporting me while you're working on behind the scenes with the parents. And sometimes that's the best that we can do, and it does move slow. I have kids who are all over the spectrum. I see anywhere from 9 up to 60 something, I think 66. And so, I mean, it's all ages. And whenever they come in, they feel like, oh my God, I'm broken. Like, I'm the most horrific thing in the world because my insides didn't turn out right. with sexuality and with gender. And the fact is that, they're perfectly fine. They just have different preferences, or sometimes they're just a little bit incongruent internally and externally. And we help them figure out how to make that work. So, does that make sense? Okay.
Can I ask you a question? Only because I learned about this resource from a student, the Genesis
Yes.
program
Dr.
project. Do you know
Lopez.
much about it, and can you speak to it just because
Yes.
it was a resource that was new to me?
It's an awesome resource, actually. Dr. Lopez is phenomenal, and she is the one that kind of put this together. Dr. Speck that I quoted from, he's actually the endocrinologist that mentored her, and he's incredible, and we're lucky to have the facility here. She's done incredible things with it. I think the first year they were expecting like 50, and they had like 200 or something. So don't quote me on that, but I think that's like, it was like a big difference from what they said. She was actually at the conference that I was at 3 weeks ago. So what it does basically is that my kiddos go in and they make a phone call and they say, okay, we've got some questions. By the time that they go to Genesis, though, they usually have seen a counselor, one like myself, who works through some of their gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation. And by the biological, you know what, it would be like, a heart murmur or something like that. Like, it's, okay, let's figure out what we have to do. We realize this is a thing, but that's the least of, we figure out how to help the dysphoric kind of feel of it. Genesis supports the kid as a whole. So like the medical side of it, they go in, they have psychological testing done, and then they kind of get to explore whether or not they need to transition or not, whether or not they need to do medicine, hormones, whether they need blockers, just time to think. I have some kids that are in my practice that go to Genesis that are just on blockers, and parents have decided, hey, we need to let them get a little bit older until, we do this. Some kids are transitioning very young now. It also, if you do work with a transgender high school, if you do work with an older transgender student who transitions late, and I think high school is late, because the problem is that they've already gone through one puberty, and so they've experienced that, but then whenever they start their hormones, they go through a second puberty. So then you've got like a 16-year-old acting like a 12-year-old, and so they're held accountable as a 16-year-old for actions chemically that their bodies are doing. You see where I'm going? And so a lot of parents, they're like, no, we want to wait, which is fine. It's everybody's personal choice. Sometimes you have a lot more behavior problems with the kids who transition later, and adults too, because then you've got, adults who are acting a little bit differently. But anyway, so it's a neat program. You have to look it up. It's with a C though. So everybody always looks it up, and then they can't find it. Yeah, but you do have to get into it. You have to have a therapist who's written a letter. Like I write letters for kids. My letters also, I go through WPATH. Like I do all my hours through WPATH. It's World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and we get together as surgeons. They come in, just sit down right with the mental health workers. They sit down with the psychologist. Everybody sits down, and we all kind of work on our skills and make sure that these kiddos are taken care of appropriately. They're trying to write Standards of Care 8, which is going to be more accommodating to kids because we need more information. Standard of Care 7, the one that we go by right now, needs to be more direct to the kids for them to be protected. So I'm excited about that. But they have a lot of good information too. So if you look up WPATH, that. So Genesis was with it's the first S, we change it to a C. Okay? Okay. Do you guys have any more questions? Okay, thank you.